the first unit of the 6 dimensions to living yourself well. The outcomes for this unit are for you to be able to get an outline and an understanding of the approach that we use within this programme, how it relates to the new ways of thinking and to leading edge practices within health and wellness. We will also introduce you to the 6 dimensions of wellness and how each of these interact in relation to loving yourself well. You will be given an assessment and questionnaire to be able to benchmark yourself against the questionnaire, and the questionnaire is based around the 6 dimensions of wellness. And we recommend that at the end of this introduction you stop and you take the time to complete this questionnaire so that you have a good baseline of how you were feeling and what you were experiencing as far as your own feelings around loving yourself and loving yourself well go at the start of the programme. You will also be exploring the new ways of thinking, and you will be given some exercises and techniques that will enable you to evolve in the process for loving yourself well. The 6 dimensions of wellness. As we were putting the programme together, Linda and I identified 6 key areas that we look at for different specific techniques for how to change the way that you feel about yourself and how to love yourself well. And we explored what wellness is amongst each of these. The first dimension is the emotions. The second dimension is the spiritual dimension. The third is of physical wellness. The fourth is your relationships and how you relate both to yourself and to other people. The fifth is your mental wellness. And the final dimension is that of your financial wellness. We're now going to look at the emotions and the emotional wellness from both an old paradigm perspective and a new paradigm perspective. And what we mean by the old paradigm is the old way of thinking. And as I give you the further examples of it, it will become apparent what those processes are within the old way of thinking. And then we'll be looking at the new paradigm way of thinking and how that affects your wellness. As we go through and begin exploring the new paradigm, it will hopefully become apparent that this programme is about using new paradigm ways of thinking that empower you and enable you to take responsibility for your own wellness and your own health and well-being. So the first of the 6 dimensions is that of emotions. As we explore each of these dimensions of wellness, you will become aware that there is some overlap because, as when we talk about metaphysics, mind, body and spirit are all interrelated. However, for the purpose of study and for the purpose of enabling your understanding, we have divided out these particular perspectives. So let's begin with the emotional dimension. And in the emotional dimension, as far as old paradigm and new paradigm ways of thinking, well, as you will guess from my accent, I'm British, I'm English, and in Britain in particular, when we talk about the emotions, and especially for the men, it was a case of the stiff upper lip, and any man wasn't expected to express his emotion, he was expected to suppress them. Big boys don't cry, and all of the rest of those type of beliefs that prevent men from being able to access and express their full range of emotions, which has actually resulted in the highest cause of death amongst men between the ages of 18 to 34, is that of suicide. When you don't know how to cope with the emotions, when you don't have the emotional resilience, it does mean that you are left with far less options for how you then proceed through your life. Another part of the old paradigm where emotions are concerned, and especially in relation to health and wellness, is as a nurse, I was taught to separate my feelings out from giving care, that we were not supposed to interact in such a way at that time. Now, I know I'm going back a long time, but we are talking about the old paradigm, and yes, things are shifting. And a good example of the old paradigm is when my mother was diagnosed with cancer, and it was her second experience with cancer, and she went to the hospital on her own. She went in to see the consultant on her own, and he gave her the news that she had bowel cancer, that it was inoperable, that there was no specific treatment that they could do, that anything that they did would be purely palliative, and then he walked out of the room. Now, as a perfect example of old paradigm thinking, at that stage, I would have been absolutely furious at that consultant because of the way that he left my mother and how vulnerable and obviously upset she was at that time, and left in a state of shock to deal with a diagnosis and a prognosis that was far from good. However, nowadays, thinking from the new paradigm where we don't look at blame, I would say that that poor man had been trained to not get involved in his emotions. He had been trained that he had to give bad news, and to give people bad news is an art and a skill that takes a lot of practice and a lot of emotional resilience. And doctors at that time were just not trained in that. Thankfully now doctors are getting much better training in this area, but as I said, that is as we move towards the new paradigm way of thinking, where we involve the emotions, where we involve the feelings of people as we're dealing with them, and recognise the impact that this has on their health and wellness. So let's go to the new paradigm way of thinking and emotions. And here there is a lot of research evidence that the emotions have a physical effect, an emotional effect, obviously, a mental health effect, and it affects the hormone balance. You only have to think, if you're working from the emotion of fear and upset, then that triggers the adrenaline release. That has an impact on your body and your physiology. What is coming through more with the likes of the work from Candace Pert and Bruce Lipton is the effect of the emotions on the good emotions, and how this enables your body to move towards health and towards healing and towards wellness. Having recognised that happiness is one of the key things for you to be able to enable yourself to love yourself well, we have a little exercise for you to do now. We mentioned in the introduction that we want you each day to do something that makes you happy. If you've been struggling to think, what can I do each day for being able to make you happy, what we'd like you to do now is we want you to write down 6 things that make you happy. And then you have to do one of these each and every day throughout the programme. This is part of your commitment to loving yourself well. This is part of honouring yourself to enable you to evolve into loving yourself better. And it's important for creating that happiness because, as we've mentioned, I like to describe it, happy moods create happy hormones, creates happy cells. And that's the reason why we're asking you to do this. And also, one of the things that we want you to do to enable you to access these emotions in more depth is, following each of the activities that make you happy, we want you to write in your journal about your thoughts, your feelings, and how you experienced the uplifting emotions and the impact that that has had on your mood and your way of thinking. The second paradigm is that of spirituality. And in the old paradigm, spirituality was based around religion. The philosophy was usually divisive. It created an us and them as far as religious practices went. In the old paradigm, God is seen as external to you and as all-powerful. He's also seen as judgmental. This applies to many religions. The classic old paradigm would be in the fundamentalist type religions, where they are exclusive, where the community is divisive against others, where their religion is seen as the one and the only religion, and that is the only way and source to get to God. And it is somewhat unforgiving, and it is also based on the notion of sin and that man is at fault. In the new paradigm, and this does not exclude religion, in the new paradigm, it is not necessarily about religion, but it is about that connection to God and recognizing the God within each person, or recognizing source energy within each person, or recognizing it as the universal life force within each person. It is about a connection to something that is bigger than you are. It is about a philosophy of forgiveness and not laying the blame at people's doors, and a philosophy of being non-judgmental. Within the new paradigm spirituality, people take responsibility for themselves, and people operate from the perception of love. And I think one of the biggest differences between the old and the new paradigm as far as spirituality is many old religions are based on fear, the fear of God and the fear of what can happen to you, whereas in the new paradigm it is based on love and it is based on faith. So it's one of the questions that you may wish to ask yourself as and when you're feeling unsure is, am I operating from a position of faith or a position of fear? Because if anybody's operating from a position of fear, then whatever it is that they're scared of, whether it's in relation to religion or other things, you're actually operating within the old paradigm. I think one of the lovely examples of new paradigm thinking is the programs, and I don't know if you have them in other countries, but here in England we have something known as Pause for Thought on certain of the radio stations. And these Pause for Thoughts are words of wisdom from people of different religious backgrounds, and they bring the perspective of each of those religions onto what is happening in everyday life. What is wonderful about each one that I've listened to, and I've listened to a lot because I used to do a lot of driving around the country for my job, and the beauty of them is that they are all based on the notion of love. They are based on respect for other people, and they are based on a sense of community and being part of a community and being caring towards that community, whether someone else is of the same religion as yourself or not. How do you know if you're operating from within the new paradigm where your spirituality is concerned? Some of the questions on the questionnaire will have given you an indication towards this, and you may well be able to identify which of the questions are related to spirituality. But in the old paradigm, it's based on fear, fear-mongering and judging. In the new paradigm, you will be operating from a position of unconditional love. You will be operating from a position of faith, not fear. And you will be operating on you will have a sense of purpose that is greater than yourself and is likely to involve some level of service to other people. And this is really important because, again, when we were talking about the emotional dimension, if you're operating from a sense of fear within your spiritual dimension, it has the same effects in that it affects your physical wellness. It's the opposite to the happy hormones and is actually creating a sea of unrest, and this is where your cells are then unable to regenerate or to heal themselves. So now consider a little exercise for the spiritual dimension of wellness, and that is, if ever you're feeling out of sorts, consider, are you operating from a position of faith or from fear? And record this in your journal. Being aware and writing these down is the first step to enabling changes. It can be quite difficult to make changes without first achieving that sense of awareness of what needs to be actually changed. And it's amazing how frequently that once you recognise something that needs changing, then ask yourself the question, how would I be operating from a position of faith and not fear? And in asking yourself the question, how would I be operating, you're actually triggering access to the frontal lobe of the brain, which is the problem-solving part of the brain, which will then deliver the answers for you. And now on to the physical dimensions of wellness. When we think about the old paradigm and the physical dimensions of wellness and health, the physical body is broken down and considered to be like a machine. The physical body is separated from the mind and from the spirit. As a nurse who was trained in the 1970s, the emphasis was very much on the physical being separated from the mind and the spirit. So when we looked and explored our physical health at that time, we looked at breaking the body down into systems, very much as you would break a car down into its component parts. We paid lip service, is what I would say, to the effect of emotions, and there was no notion whatsoever as far as people's thoughts and thinking. There was slight evidence towards, positive thinking is good for you, and that's about as far as it went. Within the old paradigm, the doctors are considered to be the experts, and you are considered to be the person receiving care, and you are considered to not have the knowledge or the interpretation of what's happening to your own body. So the doctor is the expert. He will tell you what you're supposed to do, and you are expected to comply and do it. And if you don't comply and take the actions that the doctor recommends, then you are labelled as the awkward patient. Also within the old paradigm has been the rise of big pharma and pharmaceuticals, and the notion that we have a pill for every ill. As part and parcel of the programme later on, we will be looking at the effect of the placebo and the nocebo effect. That wasn't even recognised as part of the old paradigm. And now to the new paradigm thinking in relation to physical wellness. Well, in the new paradigm, you are considered to be the expert on your body. There is a recognition that thoughts, feelings and emotions have an effect on physical health, and that mind, body and spirit are interlinked, and making changes within each of those sections can actually have an impact on the other. So changing your way of thinking can have an effect on your physical wellness, and changing the way of moving your body can have an effect on your emotional wellness as it moves the emotions around. So each one is interlinked and interrelated. How do you know you're loving yourself well in the physical dimension? Well, that's likely to be reflected in your physical vitality and your energy and your physical wellness. If you are loving yourself well, you are likely to be someone who takes regular exercise, who takes a sensible, balanced diet, and is aware of the effects of nutrition as far as your health and wellness goes. And you're likely to be someone who is happy in their body. As a little example of this, I used to say that I didn't like my legs. We all have parts of our bodies that were influenced in terms of what we do and we don't like. How could I say I don't like my legs? They've carried me through lots and lots and lots through these 61 years of my life, and they have taken me to places that I never dreamt I'd go. They're still functioning incredibly well. I don't have any aches or pains within my system for that. So in essence, I give thanks every day for the fact that my legs are fit and healthy. When I hear of other people who are the same age as myself having to have knee replacements, hip replacements and the rest that goes with it, I truly am grateful. So a little exercise as far as physical wellness goes, and as far as the physical dimension of wellness goes, is if you aren't already doing some form of physical exercise, then commit to giving it a go. Whether it be doing a simple dancing to your favourite records, going for a 10 minutes walk, or joining the local gym. Whichever it is, commit to yourself to love yourself enough to do the physical exercise that your body needs to enable it to be physically well. Hello and welcome to the fourth dimension of the 6 dimensions to loving yourself well. This is relationships, and it's worth looking here at the old paradigm and the new paradigm in relation to relationships. Looking back, as I've come through the years, one of the key dimensions of relationships before was that it was always about the relationship between you and someone else. I can honestly say that it's only over the past few years that I've actually looked at my relationship with myself. Prior to that, it was always about how can I improve this relationship with someone else? And it was the ways in which we communicated, what the communication meant, and it was an example that there is always, if something goes wrong, then someone has to be to blame, that there's an element of guilt if you don't get on with someone. And within that, the relationship was always about how you and someone else got on. It was the same in leadership models, it's the same in your interpersonal relationships, and within all relationships, it was about the dynamic between two people. And it was not about the dynamic with yourself. And in actual fact, it's your own relationship with yourself in relation to how well you are loved and how well you love yourself that is key within the new paradigm. So previously, where you may have projected onto others your feelings, in the new paradigm, you would actually look at taking responsibility for both your input and giving honest feedback to the other person, so that you weren't projecting what was inside you. So the first place in any breakdown in a relationship would now be to look within and then look at how you behave to then trigger that back from the other person. So rather than projecting, you take responsibility. The other way in which I personally used to deal with relationships was that I would always do what I needed to do to be liked. And it's still a pattern that I may occasionally find myself doing, and not actually being honest and direct. And that tells me then that at that moment, I'm not actually accepting who I am. And when I'm operating from the new paradigm, I accept who I am, I accept my feelings, and I believe I have the right to express them honestly, kindly, and with compassion to the other person, and nevertheless express them where it's appropriate. So how would you know you're operating from the new paradigm? You know you're operating from the new paradigm when the people around you are reflecting back the love and respect that you feel for yourself. You would know that your own relationship with yourself is the most important relationship that you have, and that sometimes when there is an upset within a relationship, one of the best things you can do is go away and explore what's happening within your own psyche before you go on to look at what's happening within the relationship. And you would then consider, you would also be checking on whether you have healthy boundaries. You wouldn't be putting the other person in front of yourself. You would be operating within loving boundaries that are healthy for both of you, where the give and take within the relationship is balanced, and you give when it's appropriate and not to the detriment of yourself. So there would be a balance, because as with breathing, you have to breathe in, and if all you were doing was breathing in, you'd burst, because there's a point where you then have to breathe out. And within a relationship, there is the give and take. And it may be that at some points you are giving more, and it's really important that you make sure that you take time for yourself. That would be a demonstration that you are operating from the new paradigm. There is a really exciting web page that's called The 5 Languages of Love. That's a fascinating way for you if you want to explore. If you just Google The 5 Languages of Love, there's a little questionnaire within there that explores the way in which different people know how they're loved within relationship, and the ways in which you can enhance your relationships and your relationship with yourself is knowing how you best recognise that you're loved. So for example, mine is of being of service. So wherever I am, I will find myself being the person who gets up, makes a cup of tea, who does the cooking, and it's because that's how I show people that I love them.
if I then find myself in a relationship where my partner doesn't know that I actually also value the help and the service, and they operating from a position of, no, she'll know she's loved if I'm giving her lots of cuddles, when that's not my criteria. So it's a really, really exciting way of exploring how you know you love yourself and how you show your partner love. So please just go away if you want to and explore that further. And now I'd like to look at the fifth dimension of the 6 dimensions of loving yourself well. The fifth dimension relates to mental well-being. In this current day and age, where everybody is linked into Facebook, social media, and has multiple calls upon their mental wellness in relation to deadlines and expectations with the pace of life, mental well-being has needed to face a key paradigm change. Mental well-being in the past has been very much associated with, I call it not self-esteem, but stuff esteem, where there is a link, and there still is a link where it's not functioning well, to what you have as opposed to what you are in relation to how you esteem yourself. So it's, do I have the right car? Do I have the right coat? Do I have the right house? And it was also very much associated with how you saw yourself in relation to the job that you did, whether it was a fake persona that you put out there. I can remember being afraid, putting myself under mental pressure because I didn't feel enough. And the bottom line to all of the issues in relation to the old paradigm is that in life we never considered ourselves enough. There was always another job to have, another promotion to get, another house to move into, another car to get. And it was a lifestyle based on comparison, comparing yourself always to other people. And if you weren't at the top, perhaps even comparing yourself and finding yourself being good because you were comparing yourself because you felt better. That's still not good mental well-being. A healthy mental well-being under the new paradigm is where people recognise I am enough. And it's one of those things where people then have a high self-esteem. And it's not just, I guess the word high is not a good word for self-esteem, because it's not self-esteem in relation to feeling superior or better. It's a positive self-esteem where you love yourself and respect yourself and recognise yourself as being enough. And there is no need to be anything else within the new paradigm. So in summary, you really have moved from the position of, what's the words I'm looking for? You move from the position of being what you do to being, and you happen to do something, which is a much healthier position to be. So at the end of the day, in relation to loving yourself well, how would you know that you were loving yourself well in relation to your mental health? Then you'd have a really good self-esteem where you believe in yourself, where you give yourself credit for what you do, and where you're not living with anxiety or fear. You've let that go. You've got healthy beliefs that support your esteem and the things that you like to do, and you accept that it's okay to make mistakes and that you are not what you do, that was just something that simply happened. And you will have overcome those early years programming that seeped in at the time when you didn't even know that they were going in. So it means that you've spent some time in some self-reflection, in recognising any limiting beliefs that you've passed through from your childhood, or any limiting patterns, I guess, in the way that you think, and have changed them such that you are now happy, in touch with your feelings, able to express them, and loving yourself. Now we're going to consider the 6th dimension of the 6 dimensions to loving yourself well, and this is finance. So, what's finance got to do with loving yourself well? Well, it's really simple. It's about your level of self-worth and how much you value yourself, which has a knock-on effect to all of the other aspects of loving yourself well, and also to your financial self-worth. So what's in the old paradigm in relation to finances? Well, in the old paradigm, finances are very much seen as an external factor to yourself that don't really have anything to do with you or how you feel about yourself. And that they're out there, there's a certain amount of money and you have to compete to get your share of that money. And how much of that money you get depends on how well you do things. It's about competing, about being better than other people, about getting a better job, about putting in more hours, giving more commitment, all of those sorts of things that make you devalue who you are by giving and giving and giving. So finances within the old paradigm is about having a money is scarce attitude. Now, this scarcity attitude is compounded daily by the media. You only have to listen to any broadcasts around politics and what the national money is being spent on to know that everyone is saying that there isn't enough. And yet there is more than enough money out there for everyone. And the other thing is that money is worshipped, and the getting of money is worshipped, and it's seen as something that's the be-all and end-all, and that if only you had enough money, then you'd be happy and you get what you need. Well, the statistics actually show that people who win the lottery do not keep their money. The majority revert back to their previous status within a few years. And part of that is because they've not changed their beliefs and values about how much they love themselves and their level of self-worth. So eventually their external world reflects their inner world and they return back to where they were. And this is helped, of course, by having all the old patterns that you've been brought up with and not changing them just because you have money. So all development requires a change in how you view yourself and particularly how you love and value yourself. So what's the new paradigm in relation to money? Within the new paradigm, you've actually released many of your limiting beliefs and thoughts and attitudes to money. Anyone who has the belief that money is the root of all evil is highly unlikely to find themselves earning lots of money, because it's a contradiction to their self-value and their self-image, and you get this conflict of interests because, oh, I really want some money, and yet if I have a lot of money, it'll make me a bad person. So therefore, it's like it creates a program of self-sabotage. When you're operating in the new paradigm, you've overcome those patterns, the self-sabotage doesn't exist, and you begin to reflect in your bank statements the actual value and worth and love that you give yourself. You have your finances in order because you're not afraid to face things that you previously were. You have a strong sense of self-worth, and there is an abundance mentality. So there's no sense of competition. And as an example, when we were first looking for a mentor for our company, and we came across someone who was in a similar field to our own, and the first thing she said was, oh, we're not in competition because there's more than enough to go around. And there is. In life, an abundance mentality means that you value yourself. You know that there's more money than enough to go around. You aren't afraid to know that people who are meant to come to you will come to you. And your outer world reflects your inner world. And now we'll move on to the rest of Module 1, looking at what is love. So now we're going to look for the final part of the programme at what is love and loving yourself well and what that means. So what is love, and why have we chosen love as the way to love yourself well, as the way to heal yourself? Love is actually the purest form of emotion, and when felt totally, it enables you and your body to return to baseline homeostasis. What does that mean? It means that we have a blueprint for our body that is our perfect state. And within the process of life, thinking unhelpful thoughts, feeling difficult emotions, and facing the environmental factors, these things have an impact on our bodies, which can result in illness and sometimes severe illness. So to return to a baseline homeostasis, it's the blueprint of what your body is when it's operating at its optimum level. So it's your healthy picture, it's your best person, and it's the blueprint. It's about where do you go when you want to find something, where the firemen come when you're looking at a building to try to go back to what was the original drawings, what was it at its peak and how did it start. So it's your body's blueprint is the return to your baseline homeostasis. And the way in which loving does this is loving opens your heart, which connects you to the unified field where healing occurs. The unified field is the connection to, you can call it God, you can call it consciousness, you can call it anything that you want. It's the place at which your heart connects with life and your body has the opportunity to release all the negative things and allow it to return to that place of homeostasis, that place of well-being and health. And there is lots and lots of work that's being done recently in some of the things that we're looking at, and we'll be introducing these as ways of loving yourself so that you can begin that process of learning how to do it. So that's why we call it learning how to love yourself well.
And if you are loving yourself well and relating it to the 6 dimensions, if in the emotional dimension, you would be happy, you would be balanced the majority of the time, you would respond calmly to emergencies, and you would have an emotional resilience, because as we've said before, everybody experiences ups and downs. If you were loving yourself well in a spiritual capacity, you would be connected to your purpose, you would have a strong sense of self-worth and a reason for doing. In the 6 dimensions, as far as physical wellness goes, you would be fit, be healthy, have a healthy respect for your body, the everything in moderation message. You would be ensuring that you do a level of physical exercise and some form of activity that enables you to keep your body moving and lubricated and whatever. It's a bit like servicing a car. In relationships, you would be seeing yourself reflected back in your relationship with other people. So you would see the reflection of your relationship with yourself reflected back from the people that you mix and stay with. And as far as mental health goes for the 6 dimensions, you would have a good self-esteem, you would be comfortable in the person that you are, and you would have a kind and caring attitude towards yourself, and be able to forgive yourself and forgive others. And as far as the financial dimension goes, you would have a sense of self-worth, you would have a sense of self-value, and you would be able to marry that and with a balance of from the other dimensions in being able to be paid and remunerated to the level of value that you are. So that was just to kind of pull it all together as far as what would it look like, as far as how you would look to be loving yourself. Now, one of the other things that often comes up is this notion between self-love, and the descriptions that we've just given is a description of life and living in a place where you love yourself. So Linda will just share with you the difference now between the notion of self-love, of selfishness and self-care.
Kelly Reuter has stated that selfish is choosing to consistently only think of your own needs and wants. Selfishness never yields joy, peace, or love. Self-care is choosing to honour your inner wants and needs in order to fulfil your potential, discover your purpose, and express your joy. Sometimes that requires putting yourself ahead of others. So that's a really beautiful description of what is the difference between selfish, self-care, and we want to lead you into self-care and self-love. So to finish the programme, or this module of the programme, we would invite you now to make sure, if you've not already done so, download the questionnaire, because this will then give you a benchmark of how you love yourself against all the areas that we've just been discussing and that have been covered in this part of the programme. It's for a little bit of fun, and it also has a serious element that it will provide a benchmark for you to look at. So it's important that you're honest, and it's also important that you know there's only you that sees the answers. We never get to know unless you wish to share them at some point, and we're not expecting to. We just want you to be able to look reflectively at some point in the future and go, I can see where I've changed,
And where you've grown and where you've developed.
and how you've learned to love yourself.
And tomorrow we're going to be looking at the metaphysical view of wellness, looking at the links between mind, body and spirit, and how each of these impacts on the other, and the ways in which we can intervene for different levels within each of these to enable us to improve our health, wellness and self-love and self-care. So look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Enjoy filling in the questionnaire, and we'll see you soon.
Bye for now.
Bye for now.